Hi, my name is Alessandro Gangelosi, and that's new tutorial coming from cgcookie.com for Max Cookie. We'll start to talk using this tutorial. We'll start to talk about the final gather optimization and the global illumination optimization. So we'll use an old scene I used before some months ago for a tutorial about the daylight illumination. And we see how to use some parameters for the final gather and global illumination to achieve a better result, and how to use the caching system in 3ds Max to avoid flickering and noise problems inside animation project that use the global illumination feature in Mentor. You see that in our scene we have a sun illumination done by using the Mentor sky and sun. We have also two sky portal to illuminate and to create better shadows inside the room. And let's start rendering the scene using no final gather or GI illumination. So just the basic lighting, and you see we achieve a black environment because we see the sky environment out of the room, and we see the reflection over the ground. So we have the possibility to use the Mentor sky portal, and if we use the Mentor sky portal, you see that we obtain a perfect lighting inside the room. So we have the right illumination coming from the window, but you see that we have no illumination on the dark side of the room. So we have lighting there because the light come inside the room, but we have no lighting on this wall. So the first thing usually we use is the final gather to achieve a basic setup for the lighting. So let's remove the sky portal to have a basic settings, and by default in 3ds Max you'll find the final gather set to on, and you have no diffuse bounces. So if I try to render a scene using these settings, you see that we have the illumination coming inside from the window as for the sky portal, but you see that we have a lot of noise and not bleeded color all over the mesh, all over the environment, and we have some possibility to achieve a better result. You can use, for example, the final gather precision presets. So I can go to the medium to be very fast and using a very simple way, and you see that it is slower, but it's possible that we have a better quality, and you see that we have some noise effects there, but the general lighting is better than before. Maybe the shadows are not so precise because we are using just the final gather and not the sky portal, but we have no illumination there because we have no bounces for the lighting. So let's try to go back at draft, and let's use one bounces. So the light will come inside, will go to a mesh, and then we will be bounced on the other mesh, and you see that we have some kind of lighting on this wall. And we can try using, for example, 3. And you have to imagine that usually to achieve the best result for an interior lighting, you have to use 4 or 5 to be sure you have the best lighting possible. So let's try using 4 or 5. Obviously the rendering time will be slower, but you can be sure that you have the perfect lighting for the environment. So actually we have 5, and you see that we have general good lighting inside the room, but we have no shadows because we are using a too low level for the rays for final gather points and initial final gather points density, and we can use gain to be to follow the fastest way the slider to use the medium presets. Let's copy this one and let's render again, and we had 13 seconds for the previous render, and now we see how much it will be slower. And you have to remember that our example is very simple, and we have just a cubic room with not so much furniture inside. But if you have very complex environment, like a tower, like a big environment with a lot of room, it will be very complex to be lighted using the final gather, or you have to use a very high quality for the final gather preset, and you have to be careful if you are working on animation, because you can be sure that in the final animation you'll obtain a lot of grainy, and the grainy will come from the final gather points. You see all the points, and all the points will change frame by frame. So you see the grain animating due to the variation of the final gather points for every single frame. So you see that actually we have a not bad illumination. For example, there is clear, but we can see some strange color there, and also there you can see that the bleeding is not so precise, and you can see that we have no shadows for the chair, and we have a not so precise shadow for the basic furniture there. You see that, and we can solve the problem using the sky portal. So actually you can see the differences between the first one. We have no shadows, and we have, for example, no illumination there, and the general lighting is better there than before, and you see there that the illumination is completely wrong. Let's make a copy of this render. Oh, sorry, I had a problem. So re-render it, and we'll make a copy of this render, and then we'll activate the sky portal to see how the sky portal can help us to achieve a better result. And then we move to the global illumination to understand why we can use it, and why it can be useful for still images to use a lower value for the final gather. And we'll use a very old method to use the final gather. Let's wait for the final render. I'm so sorry, I deleted the old render, so we have to do it again. But you see that for the previous render we had 13 seconds for the rendering time, and the last render was done in 1 minute and 30 seconds. So we have to imagine that we was 6 or 7 times slower than before, and you can understand that actually we are working on a very simple render. But if you are talking about maybe 10 minutes for a frame using the basic setup, you have to imagine that we will go around something like 1 hour and a half or something like that. So let's make a copy. Okay, and let's select. Okay, let's activate the sky portal, and let's render it, and we'll see the rendering time, and we'll see also the lighting to understand if it can be the final solution using the global the final gather and the sky portal to illuminate our scene. You have to remember that the sky portal will generate the shadows inside the room. So if you have tiny objects, or for example a more complex environment, you have to use an high value for the sampling of the sky portal shadows, so the rendering time will be higher. Let's wait for the final gather. And actually, you have also to remember that we are using a very basic setup for the final gather. We have a lot of parameters that we are not using at the moment. So maybe in the future we can see also how to use it to adjust and to prepare a better global illumination rendering setup. Okay, we are waiting for the rendering, and maybe this time will be more complex to find all the changes, but it will be useful to understand why the escape portal will be a good choice. You see that the rendering time is we have 40 seconds more than previous, but you see that we have there shadows. Maybe with a zoom will be better. You see that we have the shadows for the furniture, precise shadows, and you see that we have no precise shadows there. You see also, for example, the shadows there for the window, and you see that there we have a blurred shadows, and you see that there we have no problem with the color bleeding, and there we have problem with the color bleeding because we see the samples for the final gather. So we found a way to achieve a very precise rendering setup using the final gather and sky portal with a not so high rendering time. You see that we are 10 or maybe 11 times slower than the first rendering, but the quality is very high. So let's copy also this and let's close it so we can check it before after. Let's set to off the sky portal, and let's start to check how we can achieve a very good illumination setup for the global illumination using the GI based on the photo maps. You have to imagine that Mentor Ray years ago used just the global illumination based on the photo maps. So every single light will fire the photons, and the photons will illuminate and create the shadows inside the environment. And then the final gather feature was added to blur, to interpolate the photons for the global illumination to achieve a perfect final result. And this was the only way we had to illuminate the scene, and the final gather was no an illumination system for the global illumination. So let's remove the final gather. Let's go there and let's set to on the enable global illumination, and for the moment we'll use the basic parameter. So let's render again the scene, and you see that we have no final gather map creation, and we are waiting for the photo maps creation, and you see that we have the photon emission calculation. We have to wait for the global illumination, and then we have directly the rendering. Sometimes the photon emission can be very slow, but you have to imagine that you can save it and then reuse it. So maybe you have to calculate it uh, just one time, and then you have no problem to render just the final frame. Maybe it's better to stop the recording so I can wait for the photo emission, and then we can move forward to check how to use it. That's the rendering result. I just removed also the reflection and uh, physical properties from the ground material to be faster in rendering. And you see that we have a very not precise illumination. We see a lot of samples. You have to imagine that the circles are the sampling, are the photons. I can remove the sky portal, and we can see how it looks without the sky portal. And you have to imagine that every single photon is a circle of light that will bounce inside the scene. Let's see how it looks, and you see that we have no photons coming inside, and the problem is due to the settings of the photons and on a lot of things. But before we try to change the hour setup just to have the light coming inside the room. So let's change like that, and let's see how it looks. Okay, you see that we have the lighting coming inside, and we see a lot of light, and we have no sky portal actually, but you see that we have a lot of light coming inside. And let's try the same scene using the final gather, so we can have a base to be checked. Let's see with the draft setup, and you see we have a lot of light inside the room. Let's make maybe some changes. Something like that. Just to achieve a different lighting for the environment. Okay. Okay, and let's check the exposure control. And we have the indoor. Let's use 200, and let's check it. And then now we can change the burn. Okay, you see that we have less burn inside the room. Okay, that's our basic lighting using the final gather. Let's go back to the global illumination setup. Let's render it, and you see that the coloring is better because we have less cold effects. We see a light of orange a lot of orange inside the room, and that's right because we have sun illumination, and you can see that before the rendering will be was very cold, and we have to work, for example, on the tone mapping to change the coloring. And you see that we have a lot of photons inside the room, and we can change the average GI photons per light just to see the photons, so we can understand how it works. And you see the photons. You see a lot of circles inside the room, and the circles are the photons. When you have the photons, you have to go to the final gather. You have to set to on, and you can change the diffuse bounces to 0 because you don't need it to create the shadows. And for the moment we can use the draft to understand how it works, and you see that the rendering is a very good illumination, general illumination, better than the previous one, just using a very low quality, and we have a very low rendering time, 3 seconds, and it's better than before. Generally, you see that the lighting is better because actually it's more physically based, because we are using the photons and we have the right temperature and the right energy distribution for the light we are using. So let's try to add the sky portal that will help us to achieve a better shadows inside the scene. And let's render again. We had 3 seconds for the first test, and you see that now we are using the sky portal, and we have more bright rendering. We have a more cold rendering, but it's more precise, and we have better shadows, and we can use, for example, also better sampling to achieve better rendering. And you can see there that now I'm using 64, and it will be slower, but it will be very fast, because you saw the previous test was done in 9 seconds, and before we had something like 2 minutes. So now we have a very high settings for the sky portal, and a very good settings for the lighting, the general lighting, but it's not so precise, because you see that we have not so dark area there and also there, so we have to change something. Let's go back there, let's remove this one. We can go back to 60 for the moment, and let's go there in the global illumination, and you see that we have the possibility to use the optimize for final gather, so we can calculate the global illumination to be used with the final gather, so we know that it must be more precise to be blended by the final gather calculation. But let's work again on the parameters, and let's see how we can achieve better result or worse result. You see the decay. The decay is the decay of the photon energy. So now we have half decay than before, and we see that we have too much energy inside the room. And if I use, for example, 3, so more than previous, you see that we have a low energy level. So we can try, for example, 2.5. That is a little less than before. And if I try again to have the skylight, the sky portal and the final gather, let's see how it works. We have maybe a better illumination because it's not so much illuminated. Okay, let's remove the sky portal, but we have also to imagine that we can use maybe a filter to have a cold, a not so cold rendering. So let's use a render region, for example, for this area. Let's render. You see that render time is very low, and it's better. Let's use a more darker, more cold color, and you see that we are achieving a more cold rendering, and it will be better for us. Something like that maybe can be perfect. You see that the differences between the first one and the second one. So we can have something in the middle between the cold rendering and the sky portal use. So let's remove the sky portal, let's remove the final gather, and let's save this scene. Let's go there in the right directory, CG cookie, February, 3ds Max, tooth 4, and that's 3ds Max tooth F4. Okay, let's go there and let's check the radius for the volumes. So let's see how it works. Now I changed the maximum sampling radius. And you see that the photons are little than before, and maybe it's too little because we have some very little mesh, but we have a lot of space, so we have to start working with more photons. Let's try with 20,000, and you see that we have more lighting inside done by the photons. And let's say also optimize for final gather, and it will be maybe slower than before because we have 4 seconds. Okay, it's the same. Let's go there, let's use the final gather, and let's see. You see that we have lighting, but it's not so precise. And let's go there and let's use 200,000. It will be slower to be calculated, but you see, not so much. And the lighting is coming better and better. And then we can change to medium the quality of the final gather. You see that the general lighting coming from the photons is better than before. Now let's try using 2 millions, and maybe we can use a little bigger radius. Let's try with 0.05, and let's render it using no final gather just to check the photons. And you see that actually it's slower than before. But you have to imagine that the photon mapping and the final gather used together will be faster than the final gather alone to achieve the same result, and maybe the illumination will be better, will be more correct than the final gather usage. But it depends on the project. So that's the best way, for example, to work on the stills for architectural job. Also, you see inside the room, because we are using not so the problem for the bounces, we are using just the photons to illuminate the environment, and then the final gather just to bleed the color. We have the photon maps, and you see that we have a basic illumination done by the photons. And let's see how it looks using the final gather set to medium. we have to wait the photo maps, and now we can check after the rendering also the differences using the medium or the draft preset, because you have to imagine that in most of cases you can use also the draft if you're using a very high level for the global photons amount. Now the fast lookup preparation is done to optimize the final gather bleeding of the photo maps. And you see that's the basic result for the moment. And now we use also the sky portal, and we go there to use again 2 millions GI photons, and let's render the scene. And we are using the draft setting for the final gather. We can remember that before we had something like 3 minutes for the rendering, and now we are using a very high level for the photons, the total of photons we are using. We are near to the middle of the photon emission calculation. And we saw just the basic way to use the photons and the global illumination. So that's not only these things. We have a lot of feature and parameter that actually we didn't use. So maybe I can stop the recording to wait the photon emission, then we can see the final rendering together. So we have our final render using the final gather and the global illumination together, and for the moment using the basic properties and the basic parameters, we can say that it's okay for us, the final result. And we have to check how to reuse the solution we are creating inside 3ds Max, because you saw that it can be slower to use it, and you see that in the indirect illumination we have the reuse, final gather, and GI disk caching, and we have the possibility to save all the things we are preparing, and we have to check it for the final gather and the global illumination in a separate way. So you see that we can save the final gather and we can save the global illumination for the map. So let's start to see how to work with a reuse caching for the final gather. So let's remove the global illumination and let's go back to the indirect illumination and let's make a render, a very fast render, you see. Okay, it's not important the quality for the moment. Okay, and we have the basic result. You see that we can go inside the reuse and we can say to the final gather map, actually set to off, do not cache map to disk, and we say incremental add final gather points to map file, and we have to say where we have to save the map. We can use the default value for the moment. Then we have not to make the rendering. Also, if you are working on an animation, you can decide for two mode, the single file only. So Mentoray will create just a single file, including all the final gather solution for the entire animation or the still frame. And this way is better, you see, for the walkthrough animation. So just the camera is animated and still images. Or you can use the one file per frame, so Mentoray will create a final gather map frame for every single frame, and that's best for animated objects. So if you have camera and animated objects, or maybe just the animated objects, you have to use the second one, and we'll see in a future tutorial how we can use it and why it's better.